I call a special Assembly Committee of the Whole to order, which is a joint meeting with the Eaglecrest Board for Wednesday, March 5th at 5:30 p.m. Ms. Atkinson, would you lead us in the land acknowledgement, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to acknowledge the City and Borough of Juneau is on Tlingit land and wish to honor the indigenous people of this land. For more than 10,000 years, Alaska Native people have been and continue to be integral to the well-being of our community. We are grateful to be in this place, a part of this community, and to honor the culture, traditions, and resilience of the Tlingit people. Gunashish.
Gunashish. Thank you, Ms. Atkinson. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Mayor, do you want to do a sound check while you're responding?
Sure, I am present.
Okay, and we can hear you. Thank you. Mr. Steininger.
Here.
Ms. Hall.
Here.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Ms. Wall.
Present.
Ms. Atkinson.
Here.
Ms. Hughes Scandies.
Here.
Mr. Bryson.
Present.
And Deputy Mayor Smith.
Here.
Quorum of the Assembly is present. And for the Eaglecrest Board, Chair Michael Satry.
I'm here.
Kevin Crine.
Here.
Norton Gregory. I don't see, I was going to say, I don't see him in our Zoom world.
Madam Clerk, he did let me know that he was going to be absent tonight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Brandon Cullum.
Here.
Jonathan Nail.
Here.
Hannah Shively.
Present.
TJ Thomas Mason.
Here.
You may want to raise your volume a little bit if you can, Mr. Mason.
All right, I'll try it out. Thank
The
you.
quorum of the Eaglecrest Board is also present, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Moving on to approval of the agenda, the one thing I would suggest is just adding very brief introductions before we get started. So seeing no objection to that. Mr. Satry, would you like to start off? Maybe just how long you're on the Assembly or Eaglecrest Board, anything else? Keep it brief. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Satry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening to chat with the Assembly. My name is Mike Satry. I am the current president of the Eaglecrest Board in the first year of my third term.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ella Atkinson, I've been on the Assembly for a little over a year.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maureen Hall, Assembly, and I've been here for just a few months now.
Wade Bryson, I'm in my 7th year on the Assembly.
Brandon Cullum, I'm the newest member of the Eaglecrest Board. I think I'm 6 months in now.
Hi, Christine Wall. I am on the Assembly and I'm in my fifth year.
I'm Kevin Crine. I've been on the Eaglecrest Board. This is the middle of my second term, so 4 years or so.
Alicia Hughes Scandies, Assembly, 7 years.
My name is Hannah Shively, and this is my third winter on the Eaglecrest Board.
Paul Kelly, I've been on the Assembly a little over a year.
Neil Steinger, I've been on the Assembly since October.
John Dale, Eaglecrest Board. This is my 7th year.
Greg Smith, Deputy Mayor on the Assembly, going into my 6th year. And I've been the Eaglecrest liaison, and I'm an Eaglecrest user. And then we can go to online.
TJ Mason, Eaglecrest Board for a year and a half now.
Beth Weldon, Assembly for way too long now.
Very good, thank you. So we see the agenda in front of us. It's a joint conversation. We have a couple of memos that we've all read. My goal or the hope tonight is to, we see the information in the memo. Mr. Satry also has a PowerPoint or a slideshow to show us. And then just a chance for us to have a discussion, ask questions. Obviously, financial questions ahead of the assembly. We don't need to solve them tonight. That will happen during the budget process, but it's just a chance for us as the assembly to speak with the Eaglecrest board, better understand their asks. But again, we'll be making decisions in the budget process that'll be starting up in April. So, Mr. Satry, if you any words and.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Like I said before, really appreciate the opportunity for the Eaglecrest board to come here and chat with the assembly. It's always been a great productive conversation. When I presented to the assembly earlier this year, there was some specific asks that the assembly had to bring back to this board meeting, and hopefully we've satisfied some of them. But the real message to me was, for many, many years, the board under with different people on it, different management, we've always come to the assembly and said we have to pay our people more, we need more staff, and we have capital needs. And we know that moving to year-round summer operations, utilizing the city's investment in the gondola is going to help us in the future be self-sufficient, but we still have challenges to address in our current operating environment and ultimately that transition to full year operations. So I want to talk about our the sideboards to the ask on pay and staffing and capital, and then I think we can have that conversation about what your sidebars are there. But it's hard to have that true chicken and egg conversation or push a piece of paper across and say here's our number, no, here's our number. But we want to continue that conversation here tonight. So in your packet you had a memo, and I just want to reiterate some of the introduction there, that there's no question that Eaglecrest is an incredibly important and cherished community asset. We have an incredible ski area for a small community like this. We have a very passionate user base. Many of are here tonight, former board members, former management. And, we have a very dedicated crew of people operating the ski area here. And our general manager, Craig, is here tonight on the staff line up there. Aaron, with our sports director, is here as well. So, it's an amazing asset, but we know that we have to do a lot of work to keep it going for the next 50 years. So if we could bring up the slide deck, I'll walk through a few things. And I don't want this to be a death by PowerPoint session. I just wanted to put together a few slides to facilitate the conversation. But start off with a quick operational update. This has been a very, very tough year. So we want to just make sure that we're talking about what we're doing operationally, but then get into our personnel and capital needs. So if you can move to the next slide. And there's just a quick outline, and the next slide. Before we get in to what's going on up there on a day-by-day basis, there's a lot that goes on at the ski area, in addition to just, having the lifts turn and people enjoying the snow. And, that sort of effort goes year round. When I chatted with the management team this weekend, they gave me a bunch of things that they were proud to have accomplished. And the list is actually far longer than that, but I want to slap a couple of things up on the slide, just so you had that in your information of all the things we've been working on. And yes, a lot of these things are things that have to get done. That's our job, but it's never not busy up there. But as we start to look ahead towards summer operations, I mean, it is interesting that, we were, close to 5,000 visitors between Alaska Coach Tours and the Segway Tours. We don't have a head count on the zip line because that's a percentage of revenue, but we did 50,000 revenue from the zip line. So we had a significant amount of summer visitors there already, but we also were able to provide opportunities for Juneau kids, running summer camps up there. I think 60 kids over 4 weeks. So that's a program that we want to see continue going. We want to continue to expand. Give Juneau kids something to do in the summer up at Eaglecrest. But a lot went on. So next slide. So in a season like this, we've had some great successes and we've had some great challenges. Let's talk about some of our successes first. You know, we had robust season pass sales coming into the year. And, you know, I'll talk later about how that's always a very lagging indicator, but that gives us the bulk of our revenue, you know, for this season and helps smooth out the fact that the weather has not been conducive. Now, we will take a hit on that next year, no question. And, you know, we see that historically in our numbers. We sold out our snow sports programming almost immediately when it opened up. I think people sit out there at 12:01 in the morning, Aaron, and you know, just like a lot of our summer camps and swimming opportunities and other city opportunities, you know, we don't have enough for families to do, and folks are looking for that. And Eaglecrest is quite popular. If we had more positions within the snow sports school, we could provide more programming. But there's great interest. We have that future user base coming up. We actually had 39 days of snowmaking operations. We really wish we could have done more, and that's, you know, you'll see snowmaking is both on our successes and our challenges, but that snowmaking allowed us to have the winter, the skiing opportunities that we're still just eking out at the moment. Without that snowmaking, without the investments that the assembly has made in that over the years, we would not have had a season. But we were able to get our Porcupine lift, our beginner lift open on the budgeted opening day. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get the rest of the mountain opened until late January, and we're just hanging on by a thread today. But, you know, we have been able to have winter product, and at times it's been quite good up there. But I'm also the person that will say I've never had a bad day skiing at Eaglecrest. Next slide. All right, challenges. And this has been subject to much discussion, but we started out the year with mechanical issues on our Black Bear chair, and a decision was made to defer fixing that until this, you know, this coming year. You know, Black Bear is an important piece of our operation, but losing that chair doesn't necessarily mean that we lose skiing opportunities. It's a chair that we've struggled to staff full-time in the past, but we had issues, made a decision to hold on to next year, and that is a priority for us, you know, going forward. We've also had an extremely low natural snowpack. I think we all see our yards are brown and green, and it looks like that pretty close to the base of Eaglecrest as well. So, you know, we've had to supplement with snowmaking. Like I said, it's a success, but also, you know, a bit of a failure, if you will. We wish we had the staff and resources to staff that even more. There was definitely cold snaps where we potentially could have made snow and we didn't. We also, through, you know, the newer team and maybe not fully familiar with the operations, were not as efficient as we could have been, and ultimately ended up drawing water levels down low and having issues. So, you know, we do have some things to get better out there. There's no question, but that is, like I said, it's a success, you know, and a challenge. We've had mechanical issues with our snowcat fleet. That's something we have to look at in our capital replacement going forward. But when we have low snow and maintenance issues with snowcats and lack of mechanics to work on them, it becomes really tough to safely operate the mountain. One of the things that we also dealt with this year is issues with our water treatment plant that provides fresh water supply at Eaglecrest. You know, we're not, of course, on the city water system. We had pump and intake issues, had to do a little workaround. That's also the source for fire suppression in our facilities. So we've had to work with both, you know, DEC and fire marshal to make sure that we are doing the right things to get everything back in compliance. And we're now up and running now. But, you know, we're staffing a small little city up there when we're trying to be in full-time operations. So it's, once again, it's not just turning the lifts and making it happen. And then really, and this is a perennial issue. This isn't just a you know, FY25 issue, but we are short on people. We can't fill all of our positions. Our pay scale does not attract folks. We have limited workforce here in town. And, you know, you get to the point where if one person's sick, you might lose the ability to operate, depending on if that person is in a critical, you know, safety position. So that is, you know, staffing continues to be our greatest challenge we have to address. I just want to put a couple quick things in here just to show what's happened over time in terms of our revenues and expenses, just so you have that in your inbox. You'll see on these annual charts, you know, the big revenues that come in is our season pass sales, and you can see when we used to do it, you know, later on in the fall, and then we actually moved it to right at the beginning of the fiscal year to get that income in early. When you look at FY19, FY20, you can see those lower, you know, initial season pass sales because things had been a little scratchier on snowpack the year before, and we'll expect a downturn in our initial sales next year, no question. You hope that you make it up with day ticket and multi-day passes with a good snowpack, but if you have a marginal snowpack, then you're going to take a hit across the board. So you can see where, you know, day ticket and selling French fries and materials out of the shop, you know, all make up the revenue that's, you know, over towards the, you know, the ski season side of things. Next slide. Oh, actually, back up one. Apologies. You notice that FY 2025 goes to zero there in February. That's just because the revenues haven't been fully loaded into the city system from the point of sale system at Eaglecrest, and that's something that Angie's working with us on to make that a little bit simpler and updated on a more regular basis. But next slide. So there's just a look at non-personnel expenses, and the reason it says excluding period one annual expenses, there's a bunch of stuff that hits the books in the start of the fiscal year, and so just trying to take that out to show, you know, really where we're at, you know, what happens on consumables and materials, you know, over the course of a year. But really, that's a lot more manageable and easier to project than sometimes personnel expenses, because personnel expenses are a big driver. So go to the next slide. So you can tell we're a seasonal operation. You have your, you know, truly full-time folks that are on board at the beginning of the fiscal year. You bring people in November and December, and then do your best to manage their time as you go through the rest of the year. The FY25 being, you know, slightly higher is some of that's a function of the 6% increase in wages that the Assembly was willing to fund last year. But the trends in terms of how we're using those people are very, very similar. And once again, there's still some things in that February bin that haven't quite fully been loaded, but, you know, expect that to look a lot like the trends for the other years, but also just a little bit lower as we start to lose our J1 workers and as folks start to go out for the summer season. Keep going. All right, this doesn't work as well in the large format, but you do have it in your paper. But taking a look at the normal format that we see for, you know, our budget and the consolidated, you know, city financials, there's FY23 and 24 actuals, our 25 budget. We've taken a quick stab at projecting, you know, lower revenues for the rest of FY25 to see where we're going to be, but also slightly lower costs, either due to unfilled positions or things that we're not able to take on. And then just a quick look, and I want to be, you know, clear here, a quick look at the FY26 that doesn't necessarily include the next things we're going to talk about. But in last year's budget book, you know, you have that look to FY26, and that's that next to last column on the right. So that's right from the budget book. But we, you know, I took a quick stab at saying, okay, if we're in a low revenue situation because of poor snowpack this year, poor seasons pass sales, we don't make enough on day tickets, that you're going to see a significant hit, you know, from that revenue if we're not able to make that up later on in the season. So that's, I think we're all aware that that's what we're facing, but we can, you know, we already knew we were going in a negative fund balance, but that negative fund balance could be drug even further if we aren't able to get people to buy our product. All right, next slide. Staffing. So we've always said we don't have enough staff. For many, many years, the full-time equivalents in the budgets for Eaglecrest have hovered right between 30 and 33.9, and really haven't moved a whole lot off of that, at least when I've been on the board. Been very, very consistent. It's There are some positions that have been added over the years. The Duncan report brought out the fact that there's, more full-time positions in some areas, but in the end, it's been pretty flat. The Eaglecrest staff has taken a look at what if we what if we fulfilled positions or had positions at Eaglecrest to staff it in, a much more industry standard manner. That if we were to get, in a perfect world, all the people that we think it would take to operate the area, what would that look like? And it's a bit of a big, scary number. It's up to 56 full-time equivalents. Now, the board hasn't had the chance to sit down with staff and really go through these numbers and say, this is exactly what we want to do. But when you look at the big increases, snow sports is one that sticks out, but if you can increase your snow sports personnel, you can generate more revenue for the area. And so we have to look really hard at, is that increase truly going to generate more revenue? The other thing that you'll see there is a significant increase in mountain ops, which also includes our maintenance crew. Most private industries in Juneau have a very, very hard time finding maintenance personnel. The city has a hard time finding maintenance personnel. Eaglecrest, it's almost impossible because of our pay rate. But if we were able to attract people, we need many more of them. So that's what the first pass looks like from staff. We're going to be working through the details of that at our board meeting tomorrow to finalize what that ask will be for people. But if there was a magic wand that could be waved and all those people came on board tomorrow, you're doubling your personnel costs. And then we have to make sure that we're maximizing revenue on top of that. So that's a big jump. Next slide. No. Oh, yeah.
Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Satry. You did say that if you have more snow sports instructors, you'd make more revenue. Do you have any idea approximately how much each instructor makes, or what's your revenue forecast for that additional personnel is? You might not have it now, but it'd be interesting to see.
I don't have that now. I know Erin's looking at me from the back of the room. I know she has an idea, but that's something that we'll discuss at the board meeting and get back to you on that, because that is the balance, is if you're bringing in new positions, how much revenue are they going to generate? All right, so
should we take questions as we?
I'm happy
Sure.
to. Yep.
Ms. Hughes-Candies.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just since we've stopped, I see the ski patrol is a very modest increase, and I'm just curious, would adjusting, obviously not for like an executive or base ops, but if you increased your snow sports, none of that would necessitate increased ski patrol?
So, thank you for the question through the chair. Ski Patrol is one of our highlights, our successes right now. We worked with the Assembly a few years back to increase their pay rate first. It is that department. We still have a couple empty slots, if I'm right, but we're better staffed than any other department out there. So based on our mountain safety plan, that's where we need to be. Is that, look to Craig for a lifeline on that. Is that based on our mountain safety plan, we have the staffing we need.
Yes.
To run the area.
Yeah, patrol staff well.
Very good. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I was just looking at the ski patrol numbers, and I noticed it's a very modest increase in FTE, but the increase in the sum of total cost greatly increases that. Is that because you're trying to achieve closer to something of a better pay parity, or what's the reasoning behind that increase there?
So through the chair, this part does not include the pay increase. This is simply looking at hours worked. And so in the spreadsheet on this, and I slimmed it down for this conversation, the way that the full-time equivalents go up is there's a significant amount of hours on top of what we're currently working. And so that's going to drive that.
Thank you.
All right. And I want to make sure, yeah, let's keep moving forward because I want to make sure we can get discussion on that. So staffing levels is one piece, but pay increase is the other. So the most recent increase in the assembly has been great. That just, when the board has come to, the budget conversations and say we need an increase in staff pay, that's happened over the past few years. But even with those increases, we have not kept up with industry standard pay or inflation. We know that inflationary pressures are, impacting every business and city government, local government, state government, positions out there. So we did get that raise in FY25. That's great. But the wage study that Hannah worked on, a year ago shows that we're still significantly behind the industry norm, up to 40%. And when we try to attract people to work here with industry experience, low wages and the lack of housing are the absolute biggest detriment to recruitment. So taking just a quick look at if we did a 15% increase to our existing positions, not the new positions, but that 33.99 full-time equivalents, we've got about a $290,000 increment that would be into our personnel costs for next year. If we were to take a big swing at this, you're starting to push $800,000 in your personnel increment. And once again, that is just for the existing budgeted positions. If you really take a big swing at this whole thing, let's say we go 15% wage and we're going to add all these new positions, now you're starting to push $3 million in additional personnel costs. And so in that conversation, we have to balance is what's the right number? How do we attract people in those positions? And then how do we generate the revenue to justify what we're doing up there? And this is, once again, this is all about winter operations and hasn't gone to that full boat summer operations that we've talked about in the past. But one of the questions that seems to get raised more and more is, are we limiting our revenue opportunities by not having staff? So if we don't have the maintenance folks to maintain the equipment, and if we don't have enough operators, or if we lose ski patrollers, we're going to either not have available programming, or we're not going to have the available programming, and we aren't going to be able to track more folks in. Yeah.
Mr. Seninger.
So when you're talking about a 15 or 40%, wage increase, are you talking about that just across the board, or is it more targeted towards, like maintenance staff that you spoke to being kind of way behind the curve?
So thank you. Through the chair, right now that's across the board and not looking at targeting maintenance positions. If we did a 15% increase on maintenance positions, we would still be way below the going rate, in Juneau, let alone the rest of the state.
Okay. Ms. Wall had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel like I probably ask this question every time that these groups get together, but it becomes more and more relevant. We've had some conversation about, when to get Eaglecrest employees on the same wage scale steps as CBJ. I feel like the reason it hasn't happened for so many years is the dollar signs were just not feasible. As we get towards these numbers, are we in the ballpark of what it would be just to get Eaglecrest on the city pay scale? Do you know that?
So, yeah, through the chair, thanks for the question. I don't know, but what I would recommend that the assembly do is look for, whether it's allocating a few monies in the budget or just directing, the manager and staff to go work. But if there is a want to go down that path, then city HR needs to come sit down with Eaglecrest staff and work out exactly what that looks like. Because on the board, we have no idea what that looks like. Well, Hannah probably knows what that looks like because that's her business. But we need to formalize the study and not just say we think we should do this, and then we have to look at what are those positives and negatives. There's always been a concern that you're going to lose that flexibility, as a board to attract the right people in the ski industry and make sure that once again, ski area is not city public works, and so we'd have to fully vet that. But I think either money needs to be allocated or just direction to add this to the project list of go do the study and come back to us, because we can't necessarily do that as a board. And then I'm sure Hannah has something to add.
Shively.
Thank you. And yes, so actually this was as part of the Duncan report. Kirk Duncan very kindly put together kind of an estimate of what he would have assumed or would assume with his knowledge of the city and his knowledge of ski areas. Very rough estimates of what it would take to get the Eaglecrest employees on kind of the city level. And if I'm recalling correctly, that end estimate was up into the 4.5 million. So we're spitting distance, but as to Mike's point, that is an estimate based on his best assumptions, and I trust his judgment, but I can find that resource and send it to you as well if you like.
Ms. Adkisson had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at the 15% and full staffing estimate there, I guess my question is that 15% just sort of so you can get like here's a lowest ballpark of what if we had all the staff we wanted at an increase, what that would cost, or do you think you could start filling positions at a 15% increase?
So through the chair, it will help us fill positions. We are still going to run into the issue of if you find the right person in the ski industry to come up here, where do you live? But it is one piece, and and the reality is, if we did a 15% increase tomorrow, in all likelihood, over the next few budget cycles, we would still be coming in to continue to raise the floor of our wage scale. And, so we'll have that, into that budget request, but then we know you have to consider that increment with every other ask that's on the table in the city budget.
Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Mr. Satry's last comment kind of did it for me. I think the question I'm going to try and ask the board is, when are you going to have the discussion that you guys don't have a way out of this? At some point, these numbers are, well, it might even be today, unattainable. Knowing what other asks that we have for the city budget. Like, we introduced ourselves, how many years we've been on this assembly. I can't think of a year that the Eaglecrest has not come with their hat in hand and said, we need a whole bunch of money from the city to do everything that we want. And I was actually the supporter of the gondola. I was the assembly member that brought that ordinance forward. And so I do support Eaglecrest, and I want Eaglecrest to be a year-round operation. But the way that it's being run right now, as a private sector business that's being run by a government entity, is very clearly not working. If it was working, you guys would have made some of the corrections, and I wouldn't be hearing the exact same message that I heard 6 years ago, that we don't have enough money, we can't pay our people enough. We are not, the answer's not here. If it was, we do these very thorough hiring. I'm looking at the people that recognize from the Eaglecrest board. You guys know this stuff like the back of your hand. But we are only the situation is only getting worse. And the asks have continued to get bigger, and to go into get us to summer operations, that money's not gonna be there. I just can't fathom how we're gonna be able to carve out every request that Eaglecrest had. when does the board start discussing what other options are? Because your option of coming to the city and saying, give us every nickel that we need has failed. It failed last year, it's gonna fail this year, and it's gonna fail next year. So at some point, the board has to have a discussion. What do we do next? What do we do different? What's the other path we go? Because coming to the city and saying, give us more money, that's gonna fix things, has not succeeded. So has the board had any level of discussion about what other opportunities may be out there? Because having the city coffer of CBJ bail out Eaglecrest, again, the answer will be probably not this year. Sorry, Mr. Chair, hope that didn't derail us too much.
That's fine. I think we should all remember that Eaglecrest is the, I guess, activity that generates the most revenue compared to others, the pools, the ice rink. And I'm not sure if they're asking for everything, but do you have anything you'd like to say to Mr. Bryson's question, Mr. Satry?
I also, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I also think Mr. Cullum's he had your hand up. Okay, but the short answer is no, we're not having that discussion. We're open to a discussion, but that has not been part of board work, committee work. There's been, over the years, a focus on, making sure that we can get to year-round operations as the solution for a lot of the things that you talked about, and we're not there yet. So yes, we are here asking for more, and that's been the history of Eaglecrest over time, and we're really want to get to that point where we don't have to with summer operations, but I'll defer to Mr. Cullum.
Sure. Mr. Cullum or Mr. Crine, or both?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, we're still trying to understand what it takes as a board right now to operate efficiently at Eaglecrest. Like what Mr. Satry showed you here is kind of the ideal. He explained earlier that this is the result, these numbers are the result of the team at Eaglecrest getting together and looking at other ski areas and seeing how they're staffed and then comparing that to how Eaglecrest is staffed. At the same time, I think the board understands that, the assembly has been very generous and helped Eaglecrest, procure the gondola, is helping us along that path. And I think if you believe the Duncan report, it's very clear that there is a path to success for Eaglecrest, right? So we have a gap that we need to bridge. We're not perennially going to be here hat in hand if we can meet those goals. But at the same time, we need to be able to get to the gondola in a healthy way. And so I think what we're trying to share here tonight is that there's an ideal, and then we're going to discuss as a board what we think is feasible, what will get us to gondola operations with the healthy Eaglecrest and the sustainable staff. And this is my understanding. I'm not speaking for the whole board, but and that'll be represented in our budget requests. So we're not, I think, by any means trying to position ourselves as forever dependent on the assembly, but we are, Eaglecrest is part of the city, and we are a recreational area that's owned by the city, and we need support from the city. And I think unlike other recreational areas, we have a path to sustainability that reduces, if we can achieve those goals, the city's obligation to support us. So I think we can be very proud of that, and we just need to bridge that gap.
Mr. Crine, anything you'd like to add?
So, I think too, I hear what you're saying, and I think the board has realized for years that things couldn't continue as they were before. And that's what led to this decision to make a major purchase and a huge change in the way Eaglecrest operates by purchasing the gondola. But I think your question, what it really brings up, or just makes it very clear, is that we have to make sure that we're moving forward on that project. Every month the gondola sits in, on the side of the highway, it's losing money, right? And the city's losing money and Eaglecrest is losing money until it's actually operational. It's not going to generate revenue. And that's something that is, I think, unfortunately, a little bit just out of the hands of the board and really of Eaglecrest staff. I mean, that's something that maybe the assembly or the city could really help with, is continuing to just ensure that that project gets prioritized and pushed forward, because it has to move forward in order to solve the problem. But yeah, I think that we actually have recognized the problem for a long time and made a decision about, together with the assembly, made a decision about a solution. But at this point, the solutions, I think it's taken a bit longer than we all maybe hoped for. And yeah, that's I think, I would say would be the first answer to your question, or the best answer to your question.
I know Ms. Hughes-Candies has a question. I would like to leave time. We have about 20 minutes left to go over the CIP, but Ms. Hughes-Candies, if you have a quick one.
Just to be reminded, the 6% that we did last year, how you targeted that, just in the frame of this.
I didn't catch the last half of that.
The 6% last year, how was that implemented, targeted? Could you please remind me?
So it was across the board.
It was across the board.
Yes.
Great, that's all I needed.
Very good. Please go to that next slide, Mr. Satry.
So I think we're just getting to the CIP slide now. Yeah, so next slide there. So just pasted in the current CIP proposal totaling about 511,000. The Black Bear fix is a big piece of that. We have to make some final decisions on the scope of that project here shortly, but I believe it also needs a new haul rope, and we were working on getting that ordered the other day, if I remember correctly, Craig. So that's the 511 that's been identified. But the team has also gone through and just started looking at area by area at projects, big and small, that need to be addressed. And made a big master list, worked with TJ, our board member, who lives in the project management world in terms of doing some prioritization, and started to roughly put that out year by year. But in addition to that normal CIP load, especially these smaller projects, we're still looking at least $1.5 million in CIP or additional CIP dollars between now and FY30. And there's about 700,000 of them that are potentially could be done end of this fiscal year and into the rest of into FY26. Now, a word of caution. This is a list of projects. The costs have not been fully estimated. Resources haven't been assigned. Schedules have not been put together. This is the wish list of projects. And, in my private sector world, you start with that big wish list. You start assigning years to them. You do that prioritization. You look at the available capital. You knock off the ones that you can, but you still keep all the projects on the schedule so that when more capital monies or more resources are available, you can start hitting those. And you don't just forget 10 years down the road that, oh, shoot, I should have done that project, right? So we're trying to start that master planning process. But, when we look at past years where there's been, 250, 350,000 annual CIP, once again, that is not sufficient to meet the long-term needs of Eaglecrest now that we're 50 years into operating. And once again, that was the whole point of moving to summer operations, generating revenue so that we could be self-sufficient on capital going forward, because there will be some big ticket items coming, down the road as well. But this is what we're looking at right now. At least, we got 500,000 in proposed CIP, and then we're identifying these other projects. And we'll have to do a little bit more work on, like I said, in terms of, cost estimates, feasibility, resources. Because reality is, at existing staffing levels, Eaglecrest is not going to complete a lot of these projects on their own, and we will have to use contractors if they're available and at a higher cost.
Very good. See the slides?
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you. We're at 6:15, but I did want to give Mr. Simmons or any members of the board a chance to say anything. Would prefer brief, just so we can continue asking questions, but if anyone does want to make any additions. Mr. Simmons?
This is actually very recent, and it's come to light since Mike and I last talked, but the CIP has to be submitted at $350,000. So it's actually less than the 511, so there's 161,000 of that is now off of CIP and moved into that master project list we have, just for a very recent update as of yesterday, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I appreciate Mr. Bryson's comments. This is a private sector business. And thinking back, on a good snow year, we celebrated breaking even. That was how we were successful. Like, wow, we broke even this year. If you look at the costs of things over the years, I would say, there's people who can be better, but maybe in 10 years ago, you could have bought a brand new chairlift for half the price of now. The industry costs have ballooned. And throughout that time period, while we were celebrating breaking even on a good snow year, everything has gotten older. So I think to come to the assembly with these numbers and these requests without anything on the backside, that would not be, that'd be a non-starter. But I think the fact that we have the Duncan report, and then I think it was last month, 2 months ago, we had another report where it showed there was a lot of validity of those numbers from the Duncan report. So we're in a tough spot. Things have gotten older, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that's why we're just asking for support to keep things moving, because while it's a private sector business, I really think this is a part of Juneau, and we really need to keep it going. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dill. And then, not that we force this upon you, I mean, I think there is an affordability component that you all are aware of as members of the board, and $70 tickets and $13 chicken tenders. I don't know if, those could be higher, and they are where you do that, where other businesses and other ski resorts do it elsewhere. So I know that's a consideration. Other questions from the assembly? Ms. Hall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm just wondering, Mike, if you could share a little bit about the J1 visa folks, additional cost incurred to bring them here, if there is, or how long they're allowed to stay, just a little more light on that. And perhaps, if we paid staff more, would we be able to attract locals and not incur the extra cost associated with that program?
Through the chair, I don't have all those details. We do have to guarantee a certain amount of hours and pay for them. So if we weren't operating and they're here, you're still paying the bill, right? So you do have a potential liability there. Perhaps we could bring Erin up. She's been very familiar with our J1 program. If you have any additional detail, Mr. Chair, could we bring Erin up as part of staff?
I can take
Greg, or can Greg answer that? Okay.
That's okay with Aaron, yeah. In short, the J1 program is a Band-Aid solution. They're really wonderful. There's not a lot of costs to the program, but there's a lot of work that goes into the program, so there's that kind of costs. They're really wonderful to have, but they are here for a very limited time. They're only here for their semester, so they are all leaving currently this next week. So to answer your question directly, they are a Band-Aid solution because our rates are not where they need to be to hire locally or to attract people to Juneau. So they're helping, but they're not the solution.
I had a question. Of the 34 budgeted positions, how many were unfilled this past year?
I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but the short answer is a lot. Yeah, too many.
More than 5, 10?
Oh, yeah, more than 5, yeah, yeah. A dozen is safe to say? Yeah, Erin's saying more. Yeah, yeah, there's probably a dozen just in her departments. A lot.
Thank you. Mr. Steininger.
So looking at the, roughly 5,000 summer visitors that you highlighted from the coach tours and Segway tours, that sounds good, but also is a bit of a rounding error compared to the 1.3, 1.6 million visitors we get in the summer. Do you feel like, gondola aside, that Eaglecrest is doing all it can to maximize summer revenue currently? Or is there anything that could be done in advance of the gondola to, continue to capitalize on summer visitors coming into Juneau that maybe effort hasn't been put into yet? Thanks.
Through the chair, that's an interesting conversation because, we are trying to balance, local existing uses with commercial uses. And I think having this, small number to start gets folks accustomed to us being able to share that area. We know it's going to be a big jump when we are into full gondola operations. We've got, the zipline partners up there that we get revenue from, so they're operating, the facility. Of course, the Segway tour is on their own. The coach tours do take Eaglecrest staff time, and so then there's that question of, and how much time is facilitating a summer excursion versus knocking off our project list for the next year, because once again we have limited staff to go after revenue. They're even just expanding our summer camps and hiring those positions is tough. If we even just want to simply expand opportunities for Juneau families. So it's a chicken and egg thing of do you have the staff to do it, and are you maximizing your revenue? And that's something that we'll kind of, when we sit down with staff and the team, we'll definitely look at that.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. This is maybe a broader question than just on the presentation. Is this a good time to ask?
Yeah.
Okay. I think the big question for the assembly as we think about, the funding moving forward is how long. It's really helpful to have the finances of what it's going to take, but the other big question is how long until we get where we need to get. And in Mr. Duncan's report, he provided a conservative and a aggressive kind of set of predictions for the future. So I'm definitely curious what the board's impressions of those conservative to aggressive numbers were, how, if you had to put yourself on one of those, likely paths, where would it be? Or, do you need, I think his point was we need more information before we know which of these paths we're on, but that's where I feel like I need more information. So I'm curious how you all are thinking about that.
Through the chair, and I had pulled it up on my laptop here, presented to you all the slide earlier in the year that showed our original estimates of people and revenues and expenses and then showing the change in fund balance over time. And when we thought our project schedule was going to be a lot quicker, we were going to be cash flow positive by FY 28 or 29. Duncan's report shows us being, basically in a free cash flow situation by FY 30, FY 31. And so it definitely gets back to, what Mr. Krein was saying is we've got to make this happen sooner rather than later. We've got to pull that cash flow curve, into the near future instead of continuing to push it into the far future. And, we're on the bus. We are moving forward on gondola operations, and we have to do everything we can to meet these next couple construction seasons to get it there, so that we can recognize those revenues. And there's ultimately, for Eaglecrest to be financially viable, financially successful, we have to maximize the amount of summer visitation at the area. So you are pushing into that aggressive scenario.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. A follow-up on that sort of general idea that gives me a sense of, obviously, the board wants to make it sooner rather than later, but you've also been wrestling with, in recent times, realizing that this is not sustainable and trying to address what you need in the near term just to get there. I think someone said healthily, or get there to where you can make that switch to positive revenue. What percentage would you, or maybe not percentage, but how would the board characterize like how much time you're spending right now on gondola versus how much time, because you have to spend your time on all of it, and I know it's all related, but how much of your time right now has been spent on gondola?
So through the chair, the reality is we aren't spending time on the gondola because we're waiting on the engineering process to get us to the point where we can go out for bid on this. And it, and that's a conversation that, we have to have with city manager in terms of, how do we allocate, resources both within, their office and from our staff, because right now, things are stagnating, and we have to get to the next step of getting the package out so that we can start moving forward on contractors and construction. But that's also not, the board needs to advocate for that to go faster, but we're also not the engineers that are putting that package together, right? So, there's work to be done, there's coordination that needs to be done. We have to make it a priority as a board, as a staff, with the help of the assembly and the city staff.
Mr. Bryson, we have 3 minutes left.
I just wanted to finish up because last time I spoke, it sounded like I might be down on Eaglecrest. More citizens have told me that Eaglecrest is why they live in Juneau than any other comment that or reason why people say they live in Juneau. I very much believe in Eaglecrest because I know how many people Eaglecrest is special to, and I was aware that it has the highest cost recovery of any of the city operations that collects revenue. I don't want Eaglecrest to close. However, we saw another entity whose only solution was to come to us and say, just give us more money, everything's gonna be fine. And they got in more hot water, like super hot water, and it took them a little while to get out of it. I'm hearing the same thing. Just give us plenty of money and everything will be okay. And I would urge this board to explore other options. What if there isn't any more money? Every single business on the planet is sitting waiting for a giant chunk of money to fall in their lap. It does not happen, and it's not gonna happen here. So what would be the other strategies to achieve the goals that you guys want? If you come back next year and your fiscal picture is even worse, it's gonna be that much harder for us to get you guys to the end run. So you need to be thinking about Plan B. If there was enough money, I think everybody would just give it to you. There's not. That's why we're having this discussion the way that we are. But I very, very much believe in how special Eaglecrest is to the community of Juneau. I want to make sure I said that out loud. Thanks for the opportunity, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bryson. And as I said at the beginning, we'll be looking as an assembly during the budget process for what kind of funding support we provide to Eaglecrest. We are at time. Mr. Satry, members of the Eaglecrest board, thank you for your work. Staff, thank you for yours. And community, thanks for your interest and engagement. Ms. Wall, what time would you like to start finance? Very good. Thanks, everyone. We're adjourned.